Confidence is one of the most misunderstood forms of power. Most people believe it is something you are born with, a gift handed to a fortunate few who naturally command attention whenever they enter a room. They imagine confidence as loud voices, constant smiles, endless optimism, or the ability to impress everyone they meet. But this illusion keeps millions trapped in insecurity because they spend their lives trying to imitate confidence instead of building it. Real confidence has nothing to do with performance. It begins the moment you stop making other people's opinions the center of your life. The instant you realize that approval is one of the most expensive addictions a human being can possess, your transformation quietly begins. From childhood, you were trained to seek acceptance. You learned that praise meant safety and criticism meant danger. Parents rewarded certain behaviors. Teachers graded your worth. Friends accepted you when you fit into the group. Slowly, without realizing it, your identity became tied to the reactions of others. Every compliment felt like proof that you mattered. Every rejection felt like proof that something was wrong with you. This invisible chain followed you into adulthood. You became afraid to speak honestly because someone might disagree. You avoided taking risks because failure might embarrass you. You remained silent in rooms where your ideas could have changed everything, simply because you feared judgment. The world quietly rewards people who obey this system. It teaches conformity while pretending to celebrate individuality. Those who constantly seek approval become predictable. Predictable people are easy to influence, easy to manipulate, and easy to control. They sacrifice their dreams to protect their image. They exchange authenticity for temporary acceptance. In doing so, they lose the one thing that could have made them unforgettable. The powerful understand a different truth. They recognize that approval is temporary, but self-respect is permanent. Every great leader, artist, entrepreneur, and strategist eventually reached a moment where they accepted that criticism was unavoidable. The more unique your path becomes, the more resistance you will encounter. If everyone agrees with your decisions, you are probably living according to their expectations instead of your own vision. Notice the people who possess genuine authority. They rarely explain themselves to everyone around them. They do not desperately chase validation after every decision. They understand that confidence grows through repeated acts of independence. Every time you make a decision based on your principles instead of public opinion, your mind becomes stronger. Every time you survive criticism without changing your direction, you become less emotionally dependent on others. Confidence is built through evidence you give yourself, not compliments you receive from strangers. This does not mean becoming arrogant or ignoring valuable advice. Wisdom requires listening carefully, but it also requires deciding independently. There is an enormous difference between learning from others and living for their approval. One creates growth, the other creates fear. The confident person welcomes information without surrendering identity. They remain flexible in thought, but firm in purpose. Imagine waking up every morning without wondering whether people like you. Imagine creating your work without constantly checking for applause. Imagine speaking your mind without rehearsing every sentence to avoid criticism. That freedom is not fantasy. It becomes reality when your self-worth is no longer rented from the opinions of others. Most people spend years trying to convince the world they are valuable. The truly confident spend those same years becoming valuable. Your greatest prison has never been failure. It has been the belief that your value depends on external acceptance. Break that belief, and something extraordinary happens. You become impossible to intimidate because fear of rejection loses its power. You become impossible to manipulate because praise no longer controls your decisions. You become impossible to stop because your motivation comes from within instead of from the applause of the crowd. That is where dangerous confidence is born, not in the eyes of the world, but in the quiet certainty that you no longer need the world's permission to become who you were meant to be. Most people believe that the greatest battles of life happen in the outside world. They think their enemies are difficult people, unfair circumstances, or unexpected failures. But the truth is far more unsettling. Your greatest enemy has always lived within you. It is the part of your mind that reacts before it thinks, that panics before it plans, and that surrenders before the fight has truly begun. The person who cannot control emotions becomes predictable, and predictability is weakness. This is why mastering your emotions is not merely a personal skill, it is the foundation of real power. Every human being experiences fear, anger, jealousy, disappointment, and doubt. These emotions are not signs of weakness. They are part of human nature. The danger begins when emotions become your decision maker instead of your advisor. An angry person says things they regret. A fearful person misses opportunities that never return. An insecure person constantly seeks reassurance instead of building competence. An impatient person destroys years of progress in a single impulsive moment. In every case, emotion becomes the invisible force controlling destiny. History repeatedly rewards those who remain calm while everyone else loses control. During moments of crisis, crowds become emotional. They panic, overreact, blame others, and rush toward short-term comfort. The individual who remains composed immediately gains an advantage because clear thinking becomes increasingly rare. Calmness is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to experience emotion without allowing it to seize control of your actions. People often mistake emotional control for emotional suppression. They believe strength means pretending nothing affects them. But buried emotions do not disappear. They simply wait for the perfect moment to explode. Real mastery comes from observing your emotions with honesty. Notice your anger without becoming it. Recognize your fear without obeying it. Accept disappointment without allowing it to define your future. This small gap between feeling and action is where true confidence is created. Consider how easily people can manipulate someone who reacts emotionally. A single insult ruins their entire day. A critical comment destroys their motivation. A compliment inflates their ego. Their emotional state becomes controlled by whoever understands their weaknesses. Such people unknowingly surrender their freedom every time they allow others to dictate how they feel. The strongest individuals refuse to hand over that power. They understand that emotional independence is the highest form of freedom. There is a reason the most influential leaders rarely reveal panic during difficult situations. They understand that emotions spread faster than facts. Fear is contagious, so is confidence. If you remain steady while others become overwhelmed, people naturally begin looking toward you for direction. Your composure becomes a silent source of authority. Without demanding attention, you earn respect simply by refusing to collapse under pressure. Life will constantly test your emotional discipline. Someone will disrespect you. Someone will betray your trust. Opportunities will disappear. Plans will fail despite your best efforts. You cannot control these events, but you can always control your response. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen your mind instead of weakening it. Each time you choose patience over impulse, reason over rage, and purpose over panic, you reshape your character. This transformation is gradual. Emotional mastery is not achieved in one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of quiet decisions. Every conversation where you refuse to argue unnecessarily, every setback where you choose to learn instead of complain, every criticism that you examine calmly instead of taking personally, these moments accumulate. Over time, they build an inner stability that cannot be easily shaken. Eventually, people begin to notice something different about you. They may not understand why you seem unbothered by situations that overwhelm others. They may mistake your calmness for mystery or your patience for hidden strength. In reality, they are witnessing the rare power of a person who has stopped allowing temporary emotions to control permanent decisions. When your emotions become your servants instead of your masters, fear loses its grip, pressure becomes fuel, and confidence is no longer something you perform for others. It becomes a quiet force that guides every action you take. Silence is one of the rarest forms of power because it cannot be easily measured. Most people believe influence belongs to the loudest voice in the room, the person who always has an opinion, an explanation, or a response for everything. They assume that constant talking is a sign of intelligence and confidence. Yet if you study the people who truly shape history, negotiate great victories, or quietly command respect, you will notice something different. They speak with intention, not compulsion. They understand that words are valuable precisely because they are limited. The less you speak without purpose, the greater the weight of every sentence you choose to say. Human nature is fascinated by mystery. When people know everything about you, they stop wondering. When they can predict every reaction, every opinion, and every emotion, your influence begins to fade. Predictability removes curiosity, and curiosity is one of the foundations of power. Silence interrupts this pattern. It creates uncertainty. It forces people to think rather than simply react. The individual who does not constantly reveal their thoughts gains an invisible advantage because others begin filling the empty space with their own assumptions. This is why the impulsive person often loses before the real battle even begins. They reveal every frustration, every fear, every plan, and every ambition without realizing the cost. They argue to prove themselves right. They defend themselves against every criticism. They explain every decision in the hope of being understood. In doing so, they hand over valuable information about their emotional state, their weaknesses, and their intentions. The observant person needs only to listen. While one person is exposing everything, the other is quietly collecting knowledge. Power has always favored the observer over the reactor. The person who listens carefully notices patterns that everyone else misses. They recognize hidden motives behind polite words. They detect insecurity behind arrogance. They sense fear behind aggression. These insights are impossible to gain if your own voice constantly dominates the conversation. Every moment spent talking is a moment not spent learning. Many people fear silence because they mistake it for weakness. During uncomfortable moments, they rush to fill empty spaces with unnecessary words. They apologize excessively, explain themselves repeatedly, or reveal information nobody requested. Their discomfort becomes visible because they cannot tolerate stillness. Yet confidence often appears in the opposite direction. The truly secure individual has no urgency to prove intelligence, defend every action, or win every argument. Their calm silence communicates something powerful. They are comfortable with themselves. Consider negotiations, disagreements, or moments of confrontation. Most people respond immediately after hearing criticism. Their emotions push them toward instant defense. They interrupt, argue, justify, or attack. The emotionally disciplined person does something different. They pause. They allow silence to exist. That brief moment changes everything. It prevents emotion from controlling judgment. It unsettles the other person who expected an immediate reaction. Often, the individual speaking too much begins revealing more than they intended simply because the silence makes them uncomfortable. Silence also strengthens your reputation. People remember those who speak thoughtfully far more than those who speak endlessly. Imagine two individuals in a meeting. One comments on every subject, offering opinions regardless of importance. The other listens carefully, remaining quiet until a meaningful insight can be added. By the end of the discussion, whose words will people remember? The answer is almost always the person whose contribution was intentional rather than constant. Scarcity increases value, and this principle applies not only to possessions but also to speech. There is another hidden strength within silence. It protects your emotional energy. Every unnecessary argument drains your focus. Every attempt to convince people who refuse to understand wastes valuable time. Many battles are won simply by refusing to participate in conflicts that lead nowhere. Silence is not surrender, it is strategic discipline. It is the recognition that not every opinion deserves a response, not every insult deserves attention, and not every misunderstanding deserves correction. People who constantly seek validation often feel compelled to explain themselves. They believe everyone must understand their choices before those choices become legitimate. This habit quietly destroys confidence because it places your identity in the hands of public approval. The powerful understand that explanation is optional. If your actions are guided by clear principles, you do not need universal agreement. Some people will misunderstand you regardless of how carefully you speak. Others will criticize you regardless of how convincing your arguments become. Accepting this truth frees you from endless debates that never change minds. Over time, disciplined silence creates an unexpected effect. Others begin paying closer attention whenever you finally decide to speak. Your words carry greater authority because they are not diluted by constant conversation. People sense that your thoughts have been carefully considered rather than emotionally released. They begin associating your presence with composure, patience, and quiet strength. In a world overflowing with noise, endless opinions, and desperate attempts to be noticed, the individual who masters silence possesses something increasingly rare. They cannot be easily manipulated. They cannot be rushed into emotional mistakes, and they understand that true confidence does not announce itself to the world. It reveals itself through calm restraint, deliberate action, and the quiet certainty that power never needs to shout to be felt. Pain is one of life's greatest teachers, yet most people spend their entire lives trying to escape it. They avoid discomfort, fear rejection, and run from failure because they believe these experiences diminish their worth. In reality, they are the very forces that shape extraordinary individuals. Every successful person carries invisible scars that became the foundation of their strength. The difference is not that they suffered less, it is that they refused to let suffering define them. Instead, they transformed it into fuel. Rejection has the power to either destroy your confidence or strengthen your determination. When someone rejects your ideas, your efforts, or even your presence, your first instinct may be to question your value. But rejection is often nothing more than a change in direction. It is evidence that one path was not meant for you. Those who become dangerously confident stop taking rejection personally. They see it as information, not as a verdict on their identity. Every no becomes a lesson that moves them closer to the right opportunity. Failure works in the same way. Society teaches people to fear failure because it is embarrassing, but failure is simply experience wearing a different face. Every mistake reveals weaknesses that success often hides. Every setback forces you to develop patience, discipline, and resilience. The people who fear failure remain trapped in comfort, while those who embrace it continue evolving. Confidence is not built by avoiding mistakes. It is built by surviving them and discovering that you are still capable of moving forward. Pain also changes the way you see the world. It strips away illusions and exposes what truly matters. Difficult moments reveal who genuinely supports you and who only appeared during times of comfort. They teach you to rely less on empty promises and more on your own character. This understanding creates a quiet strength that cannot be purchased or borrowed. It is earned through experience. Many people waste their pain by turning it into bitterness. They blame others, complain about unfairness, and allow disappointment to become their identity. But those who master themselves choose a different response. They ask what the experience can teach them. Instead of becoming victims of their circumstances, they become students of adversity. Every challenge becomes another opportunity to sharpen their mind and strengthen their spirit. The world respects people who rise after being knocked down because resilience is rare. Anyone can appear confident when life is easy, but true confidence is revealed after loss, rejection, and failure. Every difficult experience you survive becomes proof that you are stronger than your fears. We- Your past stops feeling like a burden and begins to feel like evidence of your resilience. The pain that once threatened to break you becomes the very reason nothing can easily shake you again. Your identity is the most powerful force shaping your life, yet most people allow it to be defined by circumstances, opinions, or past experiences. They see themselves through the eyes of others instead of through the vision they have for their future. If people repeatedly call them weak, they begin acting weak. If they experience failure, they convince themselves they are failures. This quiet surrender of identity is what keeps countless individuals trapped in lives they never intended to live. Dangerous confidence begins the moment you decide that your identity will no longer be written by the world, but by your own deliberate choices. Every action you repeat becomes evidence for the story you tell yourself. If you constantly avoid difficult conversations, you begin believing you are incapable of handling conflict. If you procrastinate on your goals, you reinforce the belief that you lack discipline. Over time, these small behaviors create an identity that feels permanent, but identity is not fixed. It is built through repeated actions. Every courageous decision, every promise you keep, and every challenge you face without retreat becomes proof that you are becoming someone stronger than yesterday. One of the greatest mistakes people make is allowing temporary emotions to define permanent beliefs about themselves. A single failure convinces them they are not talented enough. One rejection makes them believe they are unworthy. One criticism becomes a lifelong label. Strong individuals refuse to accept these false conclusions. They understand that moments do not define character. Character is revealed by how consistently you continue moving forward despite setbacks. The world will always try to place labels on you because labels make people easier to understand and easier to predict. Some will call you too ambitious, too quiet, too confident, or too different. If you spend your life trying to satisfy every opinion, you will lose yourself in the process. The most respected people in history accepted misunderstanding as the price of authenticity. They knew that standing apart from the crowd often meant facing criticism before earning admiration. Building an unshakable identity also requires discipline. Confidence cannot survive if your actions constantly contradict your goals. Every promise you break to yourself weakens your self-trust. Every excuse you accept lowers your standards. But every commitment you honor, no matter how small, strengthens the relationship you have with yourself. Self-respect grows when your behavior consistently matches your values. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing validation because you no longer need others to confirm who you are. Your confidence becomes internal rather than external. You no longer change your personality to fit different rooms or different people. Whether others praise you or criticize you, your direction remains the same because your identity is rooted in purpose rather than approval. That is the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken by opinions, failure, or temporary setbacks. A confidence built not on appearances, but on the unwavering belief that you alone have the authority to define who you become. In a world where countless people compete for attention, the individuals who earn lasting respect are rarely the loudest or the most desperate to be noticed. They become valuable. They develop skills that solve problems, cultivate discipline that others cannot imitate, and build a character that remains steady under pressure. Respect cannot be demanded, borrowed, or forced. It is a natural response to genuine value. The moment you stop chasing recognition and start increasing your worth, people begin to see you differently. Most people make the mistake of focusing on appearances instead of substance. They want to look successful before they become successful. They seek admiration before they have developed anything worthy of admiration. This creates a fragile confidence because it depends entirely on external attention. The applause disappears, and so does their self-belief. Dangerous confidence grows in the opposite direction. It is built quietly, through years of learning, improving, and mastering yourself, even when no one is watching. Every new skill you acquire increases your independence. Knowledge cannot be stolen by critics. Discipline cannot be taken away by competitors. Experience cannot be erased by temporary setbacks. These become permanent assets that travel with you wherever you go. The person who invests in personal growth never truly loses because every challenge leaves them wiser than before. This is why the most confident people are often lifelong students. They understand that learning is not a sign of weakness, but a source of power. Value is also reflected in reliability. Anyone can make promises, but very few consistently keep them. When your words and actions align, people begin to trust you. Trust creates influence, and influence creates opportunities. Employers value dependable workers. Friends value loyal companions. Leaders value individuals who remain calm and effective under pressure. Your reputation becomes stronger than any introduction because people know what to expect from your character. Another important truth is that valuable people are difficult to replace. They do not rely on luck or popularity to remain relevant. Instead, they develop abilities that others respect. Whether it is communication, leadership, creativity, discipline, or emotional intelligence, they continue sharpening their strengths. They understand that the marketplace rewards those who provide solutions, not excuses. As your competence grows, so does your confidence, because you no longer depend on hope alone. You depend on proven ability. There will always be people who underestimate you. Some will overlook your efforts because they judge only what they can immediately see. Resist the temptation to prove yourself through arguments or endless explanations. Your results will eventually speak louder than your words. Quiet consistency has a way of silencing doubt far more effectively than emotional reactions ever could. Time becomes your greatest ally when your actions consistently reflect excellence. True confidence also comes from knowing that your worth is not tied to a single achievement. One success does not make you extraordinary, just as one failure does not make you ordinary. Your value is found in the habits you practice every day, the standards you refuse to lower, and the integrity you maintain when nobody is watching. These qualities create a foundation that remains strong regardless of changing circumstances. As you continue becoming more capable, more disciplined, and more dependable, something begins to shift. You stop chasing approval because your work begins attracting it naturally. People seek your advice because they recognize your wisdom. They respect your presence because they have witnessed your consistency. They trust your judgment because you have demonstrated sound character over time. This is the highest form of confidence, not the confidence that demands attention, but the confidence that quietly earns it through undeniable value, unwavering discipline, and a life that consistently reflects excellence rather than empty words.